Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I think it's easy to tell that I am not Ralph Larigo. This is Erie County Legislator Lindsay Larigo. I am filling in for the Erie County Conservative Chairman this morning and my father-in-law, Ralph, while he's enjoying some time off. We have a really exciting show for you today. We're going to talk about county. We're going to talk about the state, and we're going to talk about just the future of the Republican Party and the conservative movement here in Western New York. So I'm really excited to have a great show for you planned today. First, we have Orchard Park Town Councilman Scott Hohner in. He is running for the Erie County Legislature. And then in our second segment, we're going to be joined by one of my favorite assemblymen. Paul Bologna is going to be calling in to talk about everything going on at the state. And then we're just going to wrap up the show with just talking through, and, you'll have to live through 15 minutes of my thoughts on Western New York and the future of the conservative and Republican movement here. So I'm really happy to be joined in studio by Scott Hohner. Scott, thanks for coming in.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into the issues, I thought let's just take a couple minutes to introduce yourself and let us know who you are and what you're doing and how you got here and what made you run for Orchard Park Town Council.
Sure. So I try to give a little background going back even further than most people want to hear, but I start off with my high school days. I was a three-sport player in high school, which landed me in Canisius College Division I lacrosse as well. And from there, I landed some jobs at some pretty major companies in Buffalo, including Ingram Micro, and now I'm with Exertus Almo, financial professional. And about, I'd say, 6 years ago, I started dabbling in the political arena a little bit, and I was talking to some friends and basically was a concerned resident about some issues. Some of them were the stadium, some of them were safety, and also divisiveness that was happening in and around this area. So, for an example, I drove down towards the stadium area. I looked left and saw, a restaurant. I looked right and saw a restaurant. In my head, I was like, why isn't this better? And that's what drove me to run for town council.
I think that's great. I think, we need more people in elected office that are there because they care about the community and they want some change. So how long have you been on the town council?
This is my 5th year.
And what's some of the stuff that you're most proud of that you were able to accomplish? It sounds like you had big ambitions going in, and then, sometimes government, the realities of it is not as exciting as you think. But tell us a little bit about some of the things you've accomplished while you've been there.
So I would say we were really working on teamwork within the board. So we have a really good team. Joe Liberti is our supervisor, and he's a VP of HR. We have an attorney, Julia Mombre, who's really bright. We have a neurosurgeon, Dr. Bennett, who has been a great addition. And then we have a former police officer, John Mariano, who has added a lot of goodness to the board. And then myself, a financial professional who, tries to, bring things budget-wise for the board. So the major thing I'm proud of is probably the fact we hit under tax cap 4 years in a row so far, which, as you know, is a challenge.
That's a big accomplishment.
Yeah, and so we've looked at things like, cutting costs in addition to revenue type things that we could think through, as far as our rec programs making more revenue. You have some hit or misses with the tax revenue or the sales tax revenue, those types of things. But we've been blessed to be under the tax cap 4 years in a row.
That's great. I live in West Seneca, and we have a Republican town board that has taken over. And I think they took over really because the Democrats, spent us out of existence in West Seneca. They built a Taj Mahal of West Seneca that's right there on Main Street that I hate to drive past and think about how our taxes went up. So it's quite the accomplishment to, hold the line on taxes, and it's not an easy thing to do. Now you're running for the county legislature, so you're stepping out of Orchard Park. It's just one of the many towns you represent. So what are the towns that you're running in? And I'm sure you're knocking on doors. So what are some of the issues that you're hearing that people care about?
Yeah, some great areas in the South towns for sure. So part of Hamburg, Orchard Park, Boston, North Collins, Brant, Farnham, Gowanda, Eden, and Evans. So all great places. I've been to all of them. People are great. And just looking forward to trying to help them with their issues, infrastructure, financial, and just driving excellence where I can with those folks.
I think that's great. And, similar to you, I have a large district. We have, you're running in the 10th no, you're in the 11th. I'm sorry. I have the 10th. Yeah. But we have two of the largest districts in Erie County. I have 8 towns. You have several as well. Most of the others, it's interesting to run in a place where you don't just represent one town. You represent, a lot of different interests. And I know one thing that I hear all the time is infrastructure. I imagine you're hearing a lot about roads when you're knocking on doors.
Yeah. And I was just down in Boston and I saw a beautifully paved county road and I was like, what a great thing, So we are looking at all those scenarios. What I've heard a lot on the road so far is potholes and issues like that, and that's something that I'm hoping to help with, obviously, and walk in John Mills's shoes. He's got big shoes to fill, and I think I'm up for the task.
That's great. So what are some of the things, I know you talked a little bit about why you ran for town board. What made you want to take the step to the county legislature, and what are you looking to accomplish?
I think it's the same things. I'm worried about the divisiveness. I'm worried about safety. I've seen some weird things with the police around here and the corrections officers around New York State, and it bothers me. And I want to try to have their back, and just like having the back of the residents in my area, I want to have the back of those people that are doing right by all the citizens of our county.
It's important. It's a good thing to mention. We had mid-year budget hearings, which I'll touch on a little bit in our last segment. But we had the sheriff, and crime is up. When you look at the county, there's more property crime that's happening more than ever, and it's happening in our district. So, I'm sure safety is something that you're hearing a lot about. I know it's something I'm hearing about. I think, when we look at Western New York, we all expect to live in a safe place.
Absolutely.
And, we need to make sure that happens. So, it'll be an interesting road ahead of us. I know there's a lot going on at the stadium. I don't know if you have any insight there as a town board member and hopefully soon to be a county legislator.
Yeah, so in the stadium, we have a unique scenario where Hamburg has some land, let's say, close to the stadium. Orchard Park's land that we have available is maybe a little further from the stadium. And the stadium land that is next to the stadium is state-owned at the moment. So that makes it a little bit more challenging for some of the things we want to do. But the team, the Orchard Park team, has been unraveling some of the restrictions that are there. So we approved a 4-story or 5-story hotel at the moment. Hamburg came in with a 6-story. That doesn't mean we were done thinking about that, but at least we went from 2.5 up to something higher. We rezoned the whole area. We hired a consultant to do all the stadium rezoning for us, and we're almost complete with that. So we're hopeful that when I come down that road again, or my son comes down that road in the future, we look left and we look right, and there are businesses, there are restaurants, there are hotels, things that most stadium cities or towns have.
Yeah, I think that's what everybody wants to see. We want to see Hamburg and Orchard Park working together. I think historically, Western New York has flopped when it's come to development. We've passed up on opportunities that we had. Even in the past week, we've seen in the news, and we voted on it last August at the legislature, that property at Canalside, waterfront property is not where we should be putting affordable housing. And it's the same thing with the stadium. It's quite the opportunity to develop the future of Western New York and make sure that we have somewhere. I think people want to see restaurants. People want to see hotels. Have you talked to residents in that area? Do they have any thoughts about what they'd like to see? Because I know they get heavily impacted on what happens there.
Yeah, we had some open meetings with all the residents, so transparency is obviously big in Orchard Park. We want to do that across the county when I get elected. And we had open meetings where they were able to give us their feedback, and we incorporated that into the comprehensive plan for the stadium area. And I think it's a nice mix of their ideas, the consultants' ideas, expert ideas, so it's a pretty cool blend.
That's awesome. And it's one of those things. I know I have it in my district. Sometimes you go in and you think, everybody loves East Aurora and wants to be like the village, but you talk to residents and they have a very different understanding and perspective of what they want for the future. When you talk about transparency, what's some of the stuff you've done at Orchard Park to make sure that the residents are really involved?
Just having a lot of meetings, open meetings. We'll, whatever the issue may be, we'll have a meeting at the senior center to show them the designs, the proposed designs, and ask them to put down their feedback about sidewalks, about the stadium, about just about any issue that we can bring up, and just trying to be as direct and forthright as we can be.
I think it's really important, especially, like I said, as somebody representing a huge district. It's hard to get everybody's input, but I'm glad that that's something that you're championing. I think it's really important and a good place to be. But before we head off to our first break, do you have anything else you'd like to add, or anything else you want to say to listeners?
Just I'm here for you guys. I've got your back in District 11, and I'm hopeful that you'll vote for me when the time comes.
Well, thank you so much, Scott, for joining us. And for everybody who's wondering, Scott is going to be on the ballot in November. He represents a very large district. You can find him on Facebook, I imagine.
Yes.
It's Scott Honer for Erie County Legislature, and stay in the know with him and keep up with his campaign. But Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks again for having me.
Welcome back. Again, it is Lindsay Larigo. I'm filling in for my father-in-law and the conservative chairman, Ralph Larigo. I want to thank one of my favorite assemblymen, Paul Bologna, who's joining us by phone today. Paul, thanks for joining. I really appreciate it.
Lindsay, can't thank you enough for having me on.
I actually, before you came on, we were chatting about the last time we were on, and I found out it was one of the most listened to podcasts. So I think we got a good thing going, and hopefully we can live up to that again.
I'm going to chalk it up to youthful enthusiasm.
I think that is. We are, you and I feel like we never have our gloves off, and I think there's something about that people like to see. But I did want to have you on for a couple of reasons. I think, we had, at the county level, we had mid-year budget hearings a couple of weeks ago, and what kept coming up was that, the county executive, Mark Poloncarz, wants to keep blaming the federal government for all of his problems, but it kept coming up that the state is letting us down. We talked about affordability, we talked about crime. I mean, crime is up, and I'm sure you saw Kathy Hochul pumped $1 million last week to fix the problem, and I wanted to get your thoughts on, what you're hearing and what's going on at the state to try and address some of this crime that the state created.
What I find ridiculously fascinating, I'm not sure if anyone saw this, Governor Hochul had a Facebook post the other day, and she said it was such a magical weekend, or such a magical month. We had the World Cup and the Knicks won, and crime is down, and people are safe. And I'm reading this, and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? People are getting shot in Chippewa. Cars are being broken into all over West New York. So, maybe for New York City that people are doing great and it's all magical over there. But I can tell you right now, we have failures, systemic failures at every level, especially in Western cities that are being overrun by crime because no one is able to do anything about it. And this is in large part for a number of reasons. The state has chosen for the past decade to show forgiveness and deference to criminals and contempt and anger in blaming law enforcement. And that's it. Talk to any cop, talk to any corrections officer, and see if they feel safe or valued, or they feel like they have the ability to do their job the way that they're supposed to do their job safely. And the fact of the matter is that they can't. And not one single one will tell you that they feel valued, safe, or supported in their job. And that is in large part to whether it's bail reform, whether it's raise the age, whether it is the HALT Act for corrections officers. We have systemically, in this state, tilted the scales towards criminals and convicted felons in prisons. So that, I don't care what the hell Mark Poloncarz says about the federal government. That is purely a state issue.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And that was my biggest takeaway, last week or 2 weeks ago when we were having these conversations, is what we're seeing today is the problem of policy that was passed years ago, and it's finally taking impact. And I said it on David Bellavia's show earlier this week, and I'll say it again. Kathy Hochul coming here and saying that her solution is to pump $1 million into the area, and that'll prevent crime. You created this problem. You should be embarrassed, Kathy Hochul, because this is 100% a result of your policy. And throwing money at a problem, it is such a Democrat weak point that they keep hitting on is, there's a problem, let me throw more of your money at it. Well, we have people leaving the state because they can't afford to live here. And talking about affordability, give us a little update about what's going on and the energy problems that we're facing. As I opened my electric bill a few weeks ago, I thought about the conversation we had, because I know your father had his electric go up, and, my bill doubled, and most people can't afford that. So what can the state do to step in and fix some of these problems?
I feel like every problem the state has, whether it's crime, whether it's affordability, whether it's wages, whether it's housing, whether it's energy, I feel like I just want to sit on the corner with a massive sign that says, "I told you so." And the fact of the matter is this is also coming from a 10-year policy failure of the state, where we basically limited our own energy supply in terms of natural gas. We got rid of natural gas, but then we also forced and mandated the increase in electrification. So when you lower supply and increase demand, prices go up. That is not politics. That's not rhetoric. That is simple math and economics. And that is what has happened to everybody. So again, people don't realize that 50% of our electricity still comes from natural gas in this state. And New York State is doing everything it can to ban the production of even current gas in this state. So we have to purchase gas from, whether it's Canada, Pennsylvania, to make electricity so you can purchase it. So the market rate of electricity, the commodity itself, increases in price. And if you look at your bill, that's what you're seeing on the supply side. There's two parts of your bill, the supply and the delivery. The supply cost goes up because it is more expensive to create and produce electricity in this state. So that is why everyone's bills are going up. Then, on top of it all, the grid is old, very old, like 70 plus years old. And it is an inefficient way to get electricity from one place to another. And that is another reason why we have rolling brownouts. That's why you have the governor and the mayor of New York City begging people to turn off their air conditioners, because they're afraid of rolling brownouts that are going to impact ratepayers. So this is it's a very simple solution, and I don't care what the governor says about this, quote, all of the above approach. They can say whatever they want in terms of rolling back the CLCPA. They can say whatever they want in terms of, creating an all of the above energy approach. The fact of the matter is that in law, in statute, still remains the All-Electric Buildings Act, the All-Electric Vehicles Act, Cap and Invest, the 100-foot rule, the 2025 Building Code. All of this stuff still exists. And until the governor and, let's face it, the Democrat socialist majority in the state starts actually reversing policy, none of this stuff is going to get more affordable or more reliable. It is only going to get worse for New York State residents.
And it's crazy. And it's the core of the problem is the state, and we want to keep pointing, and I'm so sick of hearing all of these, Democrats, whether they're state or local, saying, oh my God, what's going to happen at the federal government? Oh my God, what about this? We need to fix our own issues and clean up our own mess before we start pointing to somebody else's. But what we need to do is roll back these mandates. And even if she says she's rolling them back from the governor's mansion, I had to laugh. I saw Bruce Blakeman, who's running for governor, had a video, I don't know, maybe yesterday or the day before, standing outside the governor's mansion saying, do you think that she's turning her air conditioning down? And, that's the reality. We need leaders who are going to make the tough decisions. I say all the time about the county executive and some of his absolute abysmal programs that he's put out there that we have millions of dollars pumped into, like ErieNet, and no results. Leadership sometimes is making the hard decisions and saying, hey, I was wrong and we need to go in this direction. I'd vote for that person every day over somebody who's just, chasing these headlines about, electricity. But going back to that, when we're looking at all of the electric mandates that are coming down from the state, if we don't have the grid infrastructure, what is the state going to do to fix that? I mean, are there updates that are happening right now? And how much is this all going to cost? Because we can't keep moving in that direction if we don't have the ability to maintain it.
That is a phenomenal question. And the fact of the matter is that the state doesn't want to tell you how or why the infrastructure is so bad. Long and short of it is utility companies are ultimately responsible for building out the grid, but they have to go through the Public Service Commission. So essentially what the state has done, and this is important for listeners to understand, do I like paying my energy bill? Do I like when my energy bill goes up? No. Do I get angry when my bill goes up? Of course I do. But it is always really easy to blame corporate greed on that type of stuff, and I feel like that is the default because it's an easy scapegoat. The fact of the matter is that New York State is requiring build-out of infrastructure from all of the utility companies to meet the demand of the electric policy that they have put in place. So New York State is basically telling taxpayers, we're going to raise your taxes through increased electric costs, through increased energy costs, but we're going to blame the utility companies because it's easy. We don't want to blame us. That is essentially what they're doing, because it's an easy scapegoat. So what your listeners need to understand is when your energy bill goes up, don't get mad at the utility company. Get mad at the politicians that voted in favor of all these mandates, that voted for the mandated electrification, that were asleep at the wheel when it came time to help build out the grid or put funding towards the grid or make it easier for utility companies to build out the grid. Blame the politicians, because that is why your bill is going up, not some random corporate greed from utility companies. And it is an easy scapegoat. It is an easy scapegoat to blame capitalism, when things go up. But the fact of the matter is that your energy bills going up are a direct result of terrible energy policy from New York State politicians for years.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Like I said, when my bill doubled, I for the first time in my life started looking up solar panels, because I'm sick of it. New York State is taking these horrible policies because Kathy Hochul and whoever else, even Mark Poloncarz thinks he's running for president, so they need to be further left than, every other state out there. And it's a complete and total joke. I think, one of the reasons I always love chatting with you is I think you and I are the only politicians that will say, blame the politicians, they suck.
Yes.
And I think...
Yeah, that's the thing. And you know what, Lindsay, honestly, I think you and I really feel like this. I mean, look, my core set of beliefs in terms of being a pro-capitalist, being pro-market, less government, more people-driven and business-driven solutions, that hasn't changed in 25, 30 years, as long as I've been doing this. And you know what? In all seriousness, I'm going to tell you what I think, and obviously I'm more than willing to listen to anybody who has a disagreement with me. But if you like what I have to say and if you believe in what I have to say, vote for me. And if you don't, then don't. I mean, look, my job is to be a representative of the people. So, and I feel that you and I have very similar views on this. If you like what we're coming from, support us. If not, thanks for listening.
I totally agree. And I love nothing more than responding to an email or getting a call from a constituent that disagrees with me, because I'll learn more. And either, what I'm saying will resonate, or I need to learn from a different perspective. And I think, like I said, there's not a lot of politicians out there that talk like you and I do. And I think it's, maybe why people like listening to us. But I think you and I are both parents that, we want our kids to live here. I say it all the time. And I know you represent Niagara County as well, but in Erie County, I live very close to all my parents and grandparents and in-laws. And, I want my son to live within 10 minutes of me one day. And we can't keep doing that when we're pricing everybody out of the area. It was a few weeks ago or a couple months ago, and then the Buffalo News ran the story again about, population is continuing to fall in New York State. And, Kathy Hochul can't figure out why. And it's like, well, when you commit a crime and you can go back on the street, or, your energy bill is going to double only in New York State, not anywhere else, in a month. And, it's forcing people out of their homes. Meanwhile, we have a assembly candidate down in Hamburg who's a declared socialist. I mean, these socialists are actually infiltrating New York State. Tell us a little bit about, what is the impact of that? And is it pushing at the state level? Do you see even your traditional, maybe more conservative Democrats, catering to it? I mean, why are we so afraid to call out the nonsense?
Well, if you take a look at the primary results from this past, just a couple weeks ago, we have eight brand new Democratic Socialist candidates who won in primaries against, frankly, Democrats that I actually like working with. There's a really good example is Bill Magnarelli, a longtime moderate, reasonable Democrat, someone that he was the chair of the Transportation Committee, someone that I had a really good working relationship, lost to a Democratic Socialist. You have people who are Donna Lupardo. I know, and again, I know for Western New York, people probably don't really know these names, but these are people that I like. These are people that are Democrats that I can work with, that can carry bills for us, that basically are just retiring because they're like, what the heck with this? I'm out, because it is getting too far left. And you have an activist legislature. And what's happening now is the Democratic Socialists in the next year to 3 to 4 years are going to become the biggest voting bloc in the state assembly. And that is a massive, massive problem. And I'm telling everyone, it's going to get worse before it gets any better. And, I don't want the state to implode on itself, but the fact of the matter is it might need to come on crashing down before we can build it up again. And look, you have a a sole party controlling literally everything in New York State. And one of the only safeguards that we could possibly have on that is putting Bruce Blakeman in the governor's office. So, I mean, honestly, I would take Mickey Mouse over Governor Hochul at this point just to create some type of check and balance in our government.
Yeah, I mean, we need it. I'll be perfectly honest with you. It scares the hell out of me, the amount of socialists that we have, in the state. It's scary. And you see it trickling down. We have at the county legislature, I had somebody, one of my colleagues, and I work really well across the aisle. We're in the minority caucus. I get along with all of my colleagues, no matter what they are, because I truly believe that in Western New York, we're in such a unique place because it is such a deep blue state that we live in. But I think most people are right down the middle. They talk like you and I do about, we just want government to work for us, not against us. I think we need more of that. But when you have these socialists taking over, I mean, the future of New York State is at risk, and you can't just sit by and let it happen, because it's, like I said, it's terrifying. But it's a scary place to be, and it's not a place that I want to be. But we need to have common sense return to New York State, and we need to have Bruce Blakeman. We can't afford to keep going down this path of these socialists driving policy. I resonate a lot with what you said about some of your conservative your conservative Democrat colleagues that you can work with. It comes down to being reasonable, and when that leaves, it's a scary place to be.
Yeah, I mean, and look, you talked about population leaving. If you look at the demographics of the age that are leaving, or the people that are leaving, it's people our age. It's people that are working, that are paying payroll taxes, that are having young families and going to be putting kids in the school system. And I hate to say it, you're going to end up with an aging population in the next 10 years, and you're not going to have anyone working underneath them to actually pay for all the services that those people need. So you need to have a balanced demographic of people of all ages, whether it's seniors, working age people and children, because the government and the economy is set up to have a balance of all those people. And when you have an aging population in a state, you do not have enough working age people to, like I said, basically pay for the services for our elderly. So that is a problem, and that is a concern that I have. If you look at China right now in terms of that, they have a very, very, very aged population, which is very concerning.
Yeah, it is. And it's, when we look at everything, whether it's, young families that we're pushing out, or it's even, Kathy Hochul thinks it's a crime that, millionaires are leaving New York City. Of course they are. They don't want to get robbed on the street. Of course they are. They don't want an electric bill, because unlike her living in the governor's mansion, they have to pay it. So when it doubles or triples, it actually affects them. So you're pushing out even these high income earners that are paying a lot in taxes. Those are the people that you're pushing out, and you're leaving middle class and lower class people to pick up the bill of these horrible and ridiculous policies that you have. I mean, you're pricing everybody out of New York State. Meanwhile, we still have people coming into the state because they know how much you can get from the government here. I mean, it's a complete and total joke, and it's a problem that we need to fix, and I hope we can get there. But I thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate that you, stepped in when I sent you a text. It's good to be here, and I'm sure we'll have you again on soon.
Lindsay, I'm telling you, there's always a seat open in Albany whenever you're ready, because I would love nothing more than to have you in a chamber or a chamber next door fighting side by side with me in Albany. I think that's a place you ultimately need to get to. Maybe
one day. I just want to take this last segment, I guess, humor me if you will, and just talk about what's going on in Erie County right now, and, what we're kind of facing up ahead as we look at what's to come. I just wanted to take some time to talk to you about what I think from my perspective as a county legislator and an elected official, I really believe that our job is to serve the people. And when I look at the county government, and like I've mentioned already today, when I look at mid-year budget hearings, when we get an update about what's happening with the county finances, It's concerning. I will tell you, sitting here a couple weeks ago and hearing how, we are just continually footing the bill for New York State. It might feel like a while ago, but I know our corrections officers are still dealing with it today. We have these horrible policies that come down from the state, like the HALT Act, that just rips out law enforcement's ability to defend themselves. We have bail reform that happens that immediately puts criminals back on the street as soon as they commit a crime, and we're paying for it here in Erie County. You might think, oh, this is, just happening at the corrections facilities. Well, when New York State doesn't have anywhere to place their inmates, guess where they put them? Erie County. They put them in the Erie County Holding Center. Do you think that the state suddenly comes in and picks up the bill for their food or their medication? They don't. We found out just a couple weeks ago that, the state was supposed to reimburse us over $600,000 that you and I, as Erie County residents, are paying for to reimburse us for taking on these inmates. And you know what they said? Nah, I'm not going to pay that bill. Can you imagine living in a place or you getting a bill in the mail and then just saying, nah, I don't feel like I'm going to pay for it? This is exactly why people are running out of Erie County. They're running out of New York State. We just continually foot the bill for horrible Democrat policies and horrible decisions that are being made to continually spend our money where it shouldn't be spent. And you just have to take a step back and ask yourself, what are the priorities? What do you want from county government? I know what I want. And I said it on the last segment, and I'll say it again, I want my son to live down the street from me. I want him to be able to afford to live in Erie County so that, when he has kids, I can pop down and sugar them up as much as I want without driving more than 10 minutes. But the path that we're on here in Erie County is not a good one. It is a path of spending to oblivion. We actually have, when we were discussing the budget last time, we have projects that Mark Polenkars, the county executive for 12 years, since he's been there, he has doubled the size of the budget. We went from roughly under $1 billion budget. Now we're over $2 billion. He just wants to keep dumping money into his pet projects, whether it's ErieNet, so he can hire, the failed county clerk candidate to pay her $100,000 to build something that she has absolutely no experience doing. This is how he's spending your money. His priorities are taking care of himself, taking care of those who politically contribute to him. And what do we have coming up behind him? We have next year an opportunity in Erie County to flip the county red. We haven't had a Republican county executive since Chris Collins who was willing to go in there and make the difficult decisions. I say it all the time. If this job was easy and I just got to make good, fun decisions that everybody liked, then I'm not standing up for anything. We need leaders who are going to go in there and say this program failed. The point of county government is not to provide a free internet service and spend $36 million of your money on something that doesn't even exist yet. The point of government is to get out of your way. It's to get out of the way of businesses. It's to allow businesses to thrive. It's to allow residents to thrive and provide necessary services. It's to fix roads. Stop wasting millions and millions of dollars on, purchasing property from the town of Amherst to bail out all of your political friends. Let the private sector come in and do it. But we have county executive candidates already coming out of the woodwork. You have the deputy county executive, which, I would give you $1 million if you could even know her name, because you probably don't. But she's running. She's out there saying, I'm going to be the next county executive. And what is the platform she's running on? I actually listened to her do an interview where she said she's running on no change. She's going to keep doing what Mark Polenkars is doing now, which is spending us into oblivion. It is outrageous to hear that somebody's running for county executive on failure. What am I going to do? I'm going to continue to run people out of Erie County. That's what Lisa Schmur is saying. And then you have on the other side, because the Democrats are just fighting themselves left and right, you have career politician Kevin Hardwick, who is just focused on padding his pension, and he wants to throw his hat into the ring. What has Kevin Hardwick done? He was a county legislator. He is the county comptroller. And you know what? He can go out there and say that he's the taxpayer's watchdog. Where the hell was he for mid-year budget hearings? We're discussing a $2 billion budget, and he wants to go out there and run on being your watchdog, and he couldn't even be bothered to show up. It's ridiculous. It's outrageous. The audacity of these Democrats to continue to ignore regular Western New Yorkers is crazy. We need a county executive candidate, and I hope that we get one on the Republican side. I hope we get somebody that's going to come in and take a hard look at the budget. We need somebody who's going to come in and say, this program is useless. I can sit there every week and vote against giving away $10,000 for an art project to promote, environmental awareness. But we need to drive out Republicans to vote this November to grow the majority at the county legislature. We need to drive them out next year and give them an inspiring candidate who is going to come and make real change to the county and make some of those tough decisions that we talked about. We need somebody who's going to come through and say, yeah, let's not spend millions of dollars on marketing for the health department. I mean, that's an actual brag that they had. They had the audacity to sit there and say that they're really proud of the projects that they're coming up with because they're going to pay for billboards to raise awareness about heroin use. You know what we need to do is we need to put those drug dealers in jail instead of just letting them walk the second that they're arrested. There's actual things that can be done to fix the path that we're going on. And I really hope that we can get somebody in there. And I hope that, you as conservative listeners turn out and vote, this year and next, because, like I said, it really comes down to what do people want from government? We talked with the assemblyman and we see that these problems are coming down from the state. Albany is just passing off all of its problems to Erie County. We expect to have public safety. I am a proud West Seneca resident, and I expect that there's not going to be crime on my street. I expect to be able to go to another town and have safety, basic safety. This is nothing crazy. These are the minimum expectations that we have from our county government. And you know what else? I was at my dad's house a couple weeks ago. Unfortunately for him, he lives on a county road, and I grew up on that road. And as I'm driving down it, dodging potholes, I could have ended up in a ditch. We expect streets to be paved. We expect police to have the resources that they need. And we expect government to do what they can to serve us to lower the cost of living. I was really proud a couple weeks ago to introduce a local law that I expect will pass in September that would give veterans that are 100% disabled a tax exemption. This is the kind of policy that we need in Erie County. We need to take care of our veterans, take care of our seniors, and not just foot the bill to someone else, because even though Kathy Hochul can kick her bill down to Erie County, I'm not going to kick that bill down to my towns. I'm going to make the difficult decisions, and we need leaders who are going to do that. Everybody wants to talk about affordability, and, I do too, because like I said, when I got my double the cost that I'm used to for my energy bill, I had words that I can't say on the radio come out of my mouth because I'm sick of it. I'm still paying for other things. I still have to, feed my family and pay for those basic needs. And I'm fortunate. I actually looked at my husband when it came in after I said my not so wonderful words. I said, we're in a fortunate position because we can afford to pay this, right? Like, I can make the adjustments. We can pay this bill that came in twice as high. At mid-year budget hearings, when we're talking, about what's affecting Western New Yorkers and how our budget's being spent, one thing that came up, which it broke my heart to think that this could be happening, because it's happening in my district and to my residents, that homelessness is increasing exponentially. And one of the things that they cited is that people are being billed out of their own home. They're getting that energy bill and they can't afford it. And it's not we can adjust the budget. This is a crisis. I am in a crisis now and I'm losing my home. This is the Erie County that Mark Poloncarz has created, that Kathy Hochul, she is so proud to say she came from here, that she abandoned. And this is where it's actually affecting people. I have a very rural district, and I'm, always proud of the partners that I work with, the nonprofits in my district that help people in these situations. And they're feeling it. They are feeling that, one of the things that is pricing people out of their homes is energy costs. And it's crazy that this is even a world that we live in today, where you got to worry about your electric bill and how it's going to make you unable to make your mortgage payment. So like I said, back to the basics, what do we expect from county government? And I always look at, what do I expect? And I expect when I have politicians knocking on my door saying that they care about affordability, and then I look at their votes. A few months ago, we actually were introducing, when gas went up, Erie County's collecting sales tax on that. So when the price per gallon goes up, you're paying more in taxes just because. And it's one of the things that we talked about, and we said, hey, we can actually fix this. We can do something that would provide real relief to, those working families that are, carting a kid from soccer in Elma to, a soccer field in West Seneca. We can do something to actually provide that relief. So we introduced a local law, myself and my colleagues, that would cap the amount of sales tax that we were getting on gas. And I had the nerve of the county budget director, Mark Polenkar, sent him over to say, nope, we can't do that because it's not going to have an impact. Well, guess what? When he sat in front of us 2 weeks ago, he's telling me how sales tax is over what we could have ever expected, and a lot of it has to do with gas. So when we put that bill up for a vote that said, let's collect less tax on gas, it's not our residents' fault that the price of gas went up and they're paying more. It's not their fault, and we can provide actual relief. Guess what? That failed. It failed because the Democrats listened to Mark Polenkar's. They listened to the absolute hack that's our county budget director come over and say, oh no, if you collect less tax, it won't affect taxpayers. Give me a break. You can't tell me that we're charging more and that it's not going to actually provide relief. It's these types of decisions that we need more of in Erie County, and it's what I expect from my government, and it's what I try and do when I go down there on Thursdays and want to bang my head against a wall. It's these common sense principles that we need more people who are there to do the job and aren't there to promote themselves. They're there to make the difficult decision to provide the relief to taxpayers, because we do have the options to do that. If you have some elected official knock on your door saying, oh, well, it's tough to make life more affordable, or you hear Kathy Hochul or, the county executive who is more focused on, calling himself the royal wedding, maybe instead take a look at your budget. There are actual cuts that we can make, and it's something that I work to do every day that I'm down there, and there's actual proposals that we should hold people accountable for. It's a difficult time to be a resident in New York State, and we should make it easier. When you have a county executive who's sitting at the helm, and we talk about how the population's decreasing, you know what he says? Nah, that's not what my numbers show. I don't know what numbers he's looking at, but I can't turn, it's a Western New York kitchen table. You can't turn to a single person that doesn't know somebody that left New York State and went to Florida or went to one of these states where, hey, it doesn't make any sense for me financially to live in Erie County. It's happening across the board, left and right, and unfortunately we need to start electing people who are going to make the right decision and stop electing people who continually show us what their actual values are.